Hello, guys. Welcome back to Faith Movies. Today's movie recap will be an American Christian drama from 2023 titled His Only Son. Warning, there are spoilers ahead. The movie starts in 2000 BC with God calling out to Abraham, who is shocked to hear his name in the middle of the night. He steps outside his tent to respond to the Lord's voice. God commands him to take Isaac, his only son, to Moriah and sacrifice him on a mountain that will be shown to him. Disturbed by this, Abraham weeps. The next morning, his eyes puffy from crying, he starts to prepare, cutting wood for the sacrifice. When Sarah sees this and learns about the Lord's instructions, she suggests making an altar at home, but Abraham insists on following God's will to go to Moriah and declines her idea. She urges him to take some companions since he plans to take only Isaac. Abraham consults Eliezer, asking for some men to accompany him. Reluctantly, Eliezer calls to his son, Kelzar, to join, even though Abraham worries about the safety, but Eliezer reassures him of God's protection. Kelzar eagerly agrees to follow Abraham. Abraham then visits Isaac's tent, where Isaac is happily talking about sheep. Abraham reveals that they must travel to Moriah for a sacrifice, as instructed by God the previous night. Isaac, unfamiliar with Moriah, packs his bags nonetheless. Outside, Abraham meets Eshkolam, a shepherd tending his donkey. As they prepare to leave, Sarah kisses Isaac, asking him to take care of his father, and bids them farewell. Abraham, Isaac, Eshkolam, and Kelzar then set off on their journey. The film cuts back 40 years to a younger Abraham, then known as Abram, sitting in an unfinished building. Sarah approaches him, concerned about his troubled demeanor. Abram explains that he has seen God, who appeared as a man and commanded him to move to a new land he would show him. Worried, Sarah discusses the life they have built and accuses him of blasphemy. Abraham continues, saying that God has promised to make him the leader of a great nation, but Sarah counters that they don't have a son despite their efforts. Abram assures her that God will provide a way, but Sarah is skeptical, doubting the nature of the God Abram speaks of. Despite her doubts, Abram tries to reassure her. In the present day, Abraham, his son, and their guards encounter horsemen who demand a tribute for passing through their land, claiming it belongs to Abimelech, the king of Pelesheth. Abraham argues that he has already paid many tributes, but the horsemen insist on checking their goods. Upon searching, they find only food and water. Abraham explains that they are traveling to make a sacrifice to God. He introduces himself, and the horsemen, recognizing him as a legendary figure who defeated Eastern kings with mere shepherds, eventually allow them to pass, wishing them God's protection against wild animals. Abraham's group decides to set up camp before nightfall. Around the campfire, Kelzar questions Abraham about his reputed leadership of an army of shepherds. Abraham clarifies that it was not an army, but armed herdsmen, empowered by their faith in God. He reminisces about the war they fought and the rescue of the Sodomites, who were later destroyed along with their city. That night, Abraham reflects on God's promise to make him the progenitor of a great nation. Disturbed by a nightmare, he is awakened by his son. The next morning, they prepare to continue their journey. Flashing back to a younger Abram and his wife Sarai in Canaan, Sarai criticizes the barren land, blaming God for leading them into famine. Abraham touches the soil, affirming his faith in God's promise. Sarai suggests returning to more fertile lands in Haran or Egypt. Back in the present, Abraham's group stops by a lake to rest before finding an abandoned home filled with possessions. Eshkolam starts to collect items, but Abraham stops him, insisting that they do not belong to them. Suddenly, Isaac discovers a man in the bushes, badly injured, who mentions his daughter's abduction before dying. Realizing the horsemen they met are involved, Abraham insists on leaving the body unburied as a testament. They resume their journey, now approaching Hebron. In a flashback, Sarai prays to an unfamiliar God, but Abram corrects her, indicating a change in their spiritual practices. Sarai confides in Abram that despite her prayers, God doesn't seem to hear her. She points out that it has been 10 years since they left their home, yet they own no land, and she remains childless and is getting older. Abram reassures her that God will provide in his own time. Sarai retorts that without a son, Abram cannot hope to found a nation. That night, Abram prays, asking God how much longer he must wait. God responds, promising to fulfill all his promises to Abram. In the present day, Abraham and his men reach Hebron. They are greeted by a local, but they pay him no mind. Kelzar shares with the group that he and Ishmael were born in Hebron. The story then flashes back to Abram and Sarai, with Sarai suggesting that Abram father children with Hagar, her maid, since she herself is unable to bear children. Back in the present, Abraham and his companions are setting up camp on a mountain in Hebron. Abraham goes to gather wood, noticing wolves nearby but choosing not to relocate their camp. That night, as they camp on the mountain, Eshkolom bombards Abraham with questions about God and the commanded sacrifice. Abraham admits that only the Lord knows the purpose of the sacrifice. In the dead of night, Abraham rises and moves to the other side of the mountain to pray. He begs for God's mercy, pleading that his sins not fall upon Isaac and asking God to take his life instead of his son's. After praying, he returns to camp but finds himself unable to sleep. The scene shifts back to Hagar, who is now pregnant. Sarai, unable to cope with the situation, begins to pack her belongings and blames Abram for everything, including Hagar's pregnancy. Abram reminds her that he was reluctant when she first proposed the idea. Sarai responds that she was only trying to please her husband out of her own desperation. Returning to the present, Abraham assures his son that they will reach Moriah. They start their trip towards Moriah, stopping to camp in a cave in Ephrata. Kelzar notices some writing on Abraham's staff, but Abraham doesn't know what it says. It belonged to his father. Eshkolom questions Abraham about his apparent dislike for the people of Pelesheth, especially after Abraham quickly blamed them for the death of the man they found earlier. Eshkolom, who is from Pelesheth and the son of a maid given to Abraham by Abimelech, also asks why Abraham sent away Ishmael and his mother. Abraham says it was God's command to send them away, but Eshkolom gets upset and is sent outside by Kelzar. When Eshkolom attempts to hit Abraham with a stone, Abraham defends himself with his staff. Just then the horsemen arrive. Kelzar restrains Eshkolom while the lead horseman advises Eshkolom not to attack his master, warning that he's lucky Abraham hasn't killed him for it. The horseman recalls that they were headed to Hebron but points them back towards it, though Abraham insists they are going beyond Hebron. Isaac and the lead horseman exchange words as Isaac condemns them for killing an innocent man and kidnapping his daughter. Abraham tries to de-escalate, explaining they only want to make a sacrifice. The lead horseman suggests taking Isaac as a tithe. Isaac agrees, but Abraham does not. As they try to take Isaac, Abraham intervenes and gets slightly stabbed in the chest, causing him to faint. As he lies unconscious, Abraham has a flashback to when he was visited by 3 angels. Before the lead horseman can reach him, Kelzar throws a stone, prompting the horseman to leave. During his unconscious state, Abraham reminisces about when God changed his name from Abram to Abraham and his wife's name from Sarai to Sarah. Returning to the present, Abraham wakes up and they continue their journey, with Eshkolom still tied up and both Abraham and Isaac nursing injuries. They arrive at their destination, and Abraham and Isaac proceed alone up the mountain, leaving their escorts behind. Isaac asks his father where the lamb for the sacrifice is, given they have the wood and the fire. Abraham reassures him that God will provide. Directed by the Lord, they find the spot to build the altar. While building it, Abraham recalls the moment Isaac was born. He then reveals to Isaac that God has chosen him to be the sacrifice. Confused but accepting it as God's will, Isaac agrees. Abraham tearfully kisses his son for what he believes might be the last time, and they both weep as Isaac prepares to be sacrificed. Just as Abraham is about to use the knife, God stops him, declaring that he shouldn't harm Isaac and that a lamb has been provided for the sacrifice. Isaac is spared, and they sacrifice the lamb instead. God then promises Abraham that his descendants will bless all nations of the earth. The scene shifts 2,000 years forward to Jesus Christ on the cross, where a soldier kneels and declares Jesus as the Son of God. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to give a thumbs up and subscribe. Your support is appreciated. Remember, Jesus loves you. Have a blessed day and see you next time.